Okay, welcome back to VMworld 2013. This is theCUBE. Flagship program, we go out to the events, extract the signal from the noise. I'm John Furrier, the founder of SiliconANGLE. I'm joined with Dave Vellante, my co-host from Wikibon.org, and we're kicking off the day with an awesome interview. CEO of VMware, Pat Gelsinger, CUBE alumni. Been on theCUBE, Dave and I, multiple times, so many times, you're like on the leaderboard, so in terms of overall guest frequency, you've been up there, but also you're also the top dog at VMware, and great to see you again. How you feeling?
Thank you. Good morning, guys.
Pleasure. Good to see you. So what's new? I mean, obviously you're running the show here and you're running around. Last night you were at the NetApp event, you went to a CIO, R&D. You got to go out and touch all the bases out here. What does that look like? What have you done? And obviously you did the keynote was awesome. What else is going on?
Everything, VMworld is just, it's just overwhelming. Right, 23,000 people almost. I mean, the amount of activities around that, and it really has become the infrastructure event for the industry. And if you're anything related to infrastructure, right, what's going on, right, on the enterprise side of IT, you got to be here. Right, and there's parties everywhere, every vendor has their events, every different particular technology area, a bunch of the things that we're doing, and of course to me it's just delightful that I can go touch as many people, and they get excited to see the CEO. I have no idea why, but hey, I go show up.
You've been in the industry for a long time, obviously you've seen all the movies before, and we've talked about the seas of change when at EMC World when you were there, but we had two guests on yesterday that were notable, Steve Harrod, who's now a venture capitalist at General Catalyst, and Jerry Chen, who's a VC at Greylock, and you have a 10-year run here at VMworld, which is the theme, Defy Convention, but the first 5 years were a lot different than the last 5 years, and certainly the last year you were at the helm. So, what's changed in the past 24 months? A lot of stuff has certainly evolved, right? So the Nicira acquisition certainly changed changed everything, right? You saw software-defined data center now come into focus this year, but really it's about less than 24 months, a massive kind of change. How do you view all that? How do you talk to your employees and the customers about that change?
Well, as we think about the software-defined data center vision, right, it is a broad, comprehensive, powerful vision for re-architecting how the data center is operated, how customers take advantage of it, and the resultant agility and efficiency that comes from that. And obviously the Nicira acquisition was sort of the shot heard around the world as the really, okay, these guys are really serious about making that happen, and it changes every aspect of the data center in that regard. And this year's VMworld is really, I'll say, putting the beef on the bones. Right, we talked about the vision, we talked about each of the 4 legs of it, compute, networking, storage, and management and automation. So this year it's really putting the beef on the bones, and the NSX announcement, putting substance behind it, the vSAN announcement, putting substance behind it, the continuing progress in management and automation. And I think everything that we've seen here in the customer conversations, the ecosystem of partner conversations are, SDDC is real. Now, get started.
And you've, I think, have some fundamental assumptions in that scenario, particularly around x86 in the server space. I mean, essentially, if I understand it, you've said that x86 will dominate that space. So you're expecting status quo in the sense that it will continue to go in the cadence of cores and Moore's law curve, even though we know that's changing. But that essentially will stay as is, and it's the other parts, the networking and the storage piece, that you're really where you're defying convention, is that right?
Certainly we expect that continuing momentum by the x86, by Intel in that space, but as you go think about software-defined everything in the data center, it really is taking the power of that same core engine and applying it to these other areas, because when we say software-defined networking, right, you need a very high packet flow capability, and that's running in software on x86. When you need to talk about data services running in software, right? You need high performance, snapshots, file systems, et cetera, running in software, no longer bound to physical arrays. So it really is taking that same power, that same formula, right, and applying it to the rest of the elements of the data center. And yeah, we're betting big, right, that engine will continue and that will be successful in being able to deliver that value in this software layer running on that core powerful silicon engine.
So Pat, so obviously, when you came on board, the first thing you did was you said, hey, the pricing, we're going to change some things. Hypervisor has always been kind of this debate, everyone debates about what to do with hypervisor, but still, virtualization is still the enabling technology. So, you kind of had this point where the ball's moving down the field, and all of a sudden, and in 2012, it changed significantly, and that was a lot of part of your vision with infrastructure. As infrastructure gets commoditized, what is going to change in the IT infrastructure and service providers? in the value chains that's going to be disruptive. Obviously, economics are changing. What specifically is virtualization going to do next with software defined that's going to be the enabling technology?
Yeah, and and I have, we're not out to commoditize, we're out to enable innovation. We're out to enable agility, right? And in the course of that, it changes what you expect and what the underlying hardware does. But it's enabling that ecosystem of innovation is what we're about, and customers to get value from that. And as you go look at these new areas, hey, we're changing how you do networking. Right, all of a sudden, we're going to create a virtual network overlay that has all of these services associated with it that are provisioned just like VMs in seconds. We're creating a new layer of how storage is going to be enabled, this policy-driven capability, taking those capabilities that before were tightly bound to hardware, delivering them through the software layer, enabling this new magnificent level of automation. And yesterday's demo with Carl, I mean, Carl does a great CTO impersonation, doesn't he? And
he's getting some celebrity action. He's like, hey, that's Carl Eschenbach.
Oh yeah,
Steve Herrick gave him the thumbs up too.
Yeah, Steve gave him a good job. But and so all of those pieces coming together, right? Was really, and just the customer and the ecosystem response here at the show has been, right, SDDC, it's not some crazy thing out there in the future. This is something I can start realizing value for now.
Well, it's coming into focus, and it's not 100% clear for a lot of the customers because they're still getting into the cloud, and the hybrid cloud has become, I call it the halfway house to kind of a fully evolved IT environment. But, how do you
No, it is the end game. Hybrid cloud is not a halfway house. Come on, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
I mean, to full-on utility computing. That is ultimately what we're saying.
Halfway house?
Well, I don't mean it that way.
Help me.
Okay, next question.
When you're in a hole, stop digging.
So how do you define the total addressable market of 50 billion that Carl talked about?
Yeah, and as we looked at that, we said across the three things, right, that we said, software-defined data center, right, there's $28 billion, hybrid cloud, 14 billion, 8 billion for the end-user computing, that's this 50 billion opportunity. But even there, I think that dramatically understates the market opportunity. IT overall is $1.7 trillion. Right, the communications, the services, outsourcing, et cetera. And actually, the piece that we're talking about is really the underpinnings for a much larger set of impact on the part of what applications are going to be developed, how services are delivered, how consumers and businesses are able to take advantage of IT. So yes, that's the $50 billion. We'll give you the math, we'll show you all the details of Gartner's and IDC's to support it. But to us, the vision and the impact that we're out for is far more dramatic than that would even imply.
Well, that's good news, because we said to Carl, it's good that your market cap is bigger than well, your TAM is bigger than your market cap.
Yeah,
right?
that's
and so
nice.
Said, okay, well, now
we're
we're
out to fix the market cap piece.
He said, now we got to get to 50 billion, so I'm glad to hear there's upside to the TAM. Well, I wanted to ask you about the ecosystem conversation. When you talk about getting into things like software-defined networking and software-defined storage, what's the discourse like in the ecosystem? From guys like, let's take the storage side, EMC, at NetApp last night, do they say, hey, software-defined storage, we really like that, but we want to be in that business. So talk about that discussion.
Yeah, and clearly, every piece of software defined, whether it's software-defined storage, software-defined data services, software-defined security services, or networking, every piece of that has ecosystem implications along the way. But if you would go talk to a NetApp or EMC, they'd say, you're an appliance vendor, and they would quickly respond and say, no, our value's in software, and we happen to deliver it as an appliance. And we'd say, great, let's start delivering the software value as a software appliance, right, through virtualization and through the software delivery mechanisms that we're talking about for this new platform. Now, each one of them then has to adjust their product strategies, their business strategies to enable those software components, right, independent of their hardware elements, for full execution and embodiment into this software-defined data center future. But for the most part, right, every one of them is saying, yes, now how do we figure out how to get there, and how do we decompose our value, embody it in new ways, and how can we enable that in this new software-defined data center vision?
And they've always done that with software companies. I mean, certainly Microsoft and Oracle have always grabbed a piece of the storage stack and put it into their own, but it's been very narrow within their own spaces, and of course, now VMware is running any application, right, anywhere. So it's more of a general purpose platform. So is it,
Absolutely.
is it a trickier fit for the ecosystem to figure out where that white space is?
Oh, absolutely. Every one of them has to figure out their strategy. If you're F5, right? You know, I was with John McAdam this morning. Okay, how do I take my value? And he would very quickly say, hey, you know, our values in software, we deliver it as mostly as appliances, but how do we shift? You know, if you're Checkpoint, okay, you know, they're already, right, you know, a largely software value, or Riverbed, or, you know, the various software vendors and security as well. Each one of them are having to rethink their strategies in the context of software defined, but customers are saying, wow, this is powerful. The agility and the benefits that I get from it, they're driving them to go there.
So what's the key to giving them confidence? Is it transparency, just sharing roadmaps, joint integration?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Right,
Anything else? Am I missing anything there?
You know, also, you know, how we work with them and go to market as well. You know, how do we work with them as we go to customers? You know, they're expecting from us that, okay, you know, if this is one of our accounts, come in and work with us in those accounts as well. So we do have to be transparent. We have to have the APIs that enable them to do integration. We have to work with them in terms of enabling their innovation in the context of this platform that we're building. But as we work along the way, we're getting good responses to that.
Pat, how do you look at the application market? Obviously, end user computing, you guys are beefing that up. You got Sanjay Poonen coming in, and obviously mobile and cloud. We've talked about this before in theCUBE, but core IT has always been enabling kind of the infrastructure, and then you get what you get from what you have in IT. Now the shift is applications coming from outside IT, business units and outside from partners, whether they're resellers. How do you view that tsunami of apps coming in that need infrastructure on demand or horizontally scalable at will?
Yeah, so first point to be is yes. Right, you know, we do see that, you know, as infrastructure becomes more agile and more self-provisioned, right, more aligned to the requirements of applications, we do see that it becomes a tsunami of new applications. We're also working very hard to enable IT to be the friend of the line of business, no longer seen as a barrier, but really seen as a friend, partner, enabler of what they're trying to do, because many of the, you know, line of businesses have been finding ways, you know, how do I get around this slow-moving IT? Well, we want to make IT fast-moving and enabling to meet their security, governance, you know, SLA requirements, while they're also enabling these powerful new applications to emerge. And that to us is what infrastructure is all about for the future, is enabling, you know, businesses to move at the speed of business and not have infrastructure being a limiter. And as we're doing things, you know, like the big data announcements that we did, enabling infrastructure that's more agility. You'll see us do more things in the app dev area over time, and enabling the management tools to integrate more effectively to those environments. Self-service portals that are enabling that, and obviously with guys like Sanjay and our mobile initiative, yeah, that's a big step up. Don't you like Sanjay? He's a great addition to the team.
Sanjay's awesome, he's been great, and he's done a lot on the mobile side. Obviously that is something that the end users want.
Yeah, that's an interesting way that I put him into that business group for us.
Well, on the flash side, so under the hood, right? So you look under the hood, you got big data on the dashboard, everyone's driving this car to the new future of IT. Under the hood, you got flash. That's changing storage a bit, and certainly reconfiguring what a DAS is and NAS and SAN. Obviously you talked about vSAN in your keynote. What is happening in your vision with compute? I mean, obviously, if you have more and more apps hitting IT, coming in outside core IT, but have to be managed by core IT, does that change the computing paradigm? Does it make it more distributed, more software? I mean, how do you look at that? Because that changes the configuration of, say, the compute architecture.
Sure, and you know, a couple of things, if you think about the show here, you know, that we've done, you know, two of them in particular in this space. One is vSAN, right? And vSAN is creating converged infrastructure that includes storage. Right? Why do you do that? Well, now you have, you know, storage, you know, I mean, apps are about data, right? Apps need data to go operate on, so now we've created, right, an integrated storage tier that essentially presents a integrated application environment in converged infrastructure. That changes the game. We talked about the Hadoop, you know, extensions. It changes how you think about these big data applications. Also the Cloud Foundry announcement, right? On, off-premise, a PaaS layer to uniquely enable applications. And as they've done that on the PaaS layer, boy, you know, you don't have to think about the infrastructure requirements to deploy that on or off premise, or increasingly, as I forecast for the future, hybrid applications. Born in the hybrid, not born in the cloud, but born in the hybrid cloud applications that truly put the stuff that belongs on premise, puts the stuff that belongs in the cloud, right, and enables them to fundamentally work together in a secure, operational manner.
So the apps are dictating to the infrastructure basically on-demand resources, and
Absolutely.
then essentially
right.
compile
and
that.
The infrastructure says, here's the services that I have already already, right, in catalogs that you can immediately take advantage of. And if you fit inside of these catalogs, you're done. It self-provisions from that point on, and we've automated the operation and everything to go against that.
So that concept of born in the hybrid is a good one. So obviously that's your sweet spot. You're going from a position of
Yeah, and
strength
this stupid halfway house hybrid comment. I mean, I've never heard something so idiotic before.
Go back to that.
I don't know, it was probably an Andreessen comment or something, I don't know.
Okay,
He's done well for himself, Mark Andreessen.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So okay, Google and Amazon obviously going to have a harder time that born in the hybrid. What about Microsoft? They got a good shot at born in the hybrid, don't they?
Yeah, and I think I've said the 4 companies that I think have a real shot to be very large, significant players for public cloud infrastructure services. Clearly Amazon. Google, they have a large, substantive, very creative company. Microsoft, they have a large position, Azure, right, what they've done with Hyper-V, and ourselves. And I think that those, the 2 that sort of have the natural assets to participate in the hybrid space are us and Microsoft. At that level, and obviously, we think we have lots of advantages versus Microsoft. We think we're miles ahead of them in SDDC, right? We think the seamlessness and the compatibility that we're building with one software stack, not 2. It's not Azure and Hyper-V. It is SDDC in the cloud and on premise. That gives us significant advantages, and then we're going to build these value-added services on top of it. Like we announced with Desktop as a service, Cloud Foundry as a service, DR as a service. We're going to quickly build that stack of capabilities that just give substantial value to enterprise customers.
So I got to ask you, talk about hybrid since you brought it up again. So software-defined data center software. So what happens to the data center, the actual physical data center? You mentioned about the museum. I mean, what is it going to look like? I mean, right now you still have power and cooling. You can have out utility computing with cloud resources on demand. People are going to still run data centers.
You're talking about the facility.
Yeah, the actual facility. I'm still going to have servers. They're going to there'll still be an on-premise. Do you see that? How do you see that phasing out to hybrid, and what does that look like physically for someone to manage? Just still power, facility management, all that stuff.
Yeah, and in many ways, I think here the cloud guys, Googles and Amazons and Yahoos and Facebooks have actually led the way in doing some pretty creative work. That these things become highly standardized, highly modularized, highly scalable. Very few number of admins per server ratio as we go forward. These become very automated factories, right, of cloud execution. Some of those will be on-premise, some of those will be off-premise, but for the most part they'll look the same, right, in how they operate. And our vision for software-defined data center is that software layer is taking away the complexity, right, of what operates underneath it. They'll be standardized, they'll be modularized, you plug in power, you plug in cooling, you plug in network, right, and these things will operate
basically efficient down to the bone, fully automated with software.
Yeah, and people will decide what they put in their private cloud, based on business requirements, SLAs, privacy requirements, data governance requirements, right? I mean, in Europe, right? Got to be on premise in these locations, and then they'll say, put stuff in the public cloud that allows me to burst effectively. Maybe I DR because I don't do that real well, or these applications that belongs in the cloud, right? Because of its distributed nature, but keep the data on premise, and really treat it as a menu of options to optimize the business requirements between CapEx, OpEx, regulatory requirements, scale requirements, expertise, mission critical, and all of those things then are delivered by a sustainable position, not some stupid hybrid, halfway house, a sustainable position that optimizes against the business requirements that they have.
Let me take one of those points, SLA, right? Everybody likes to attack Amazon on its SLAs, but in many regards,
I'm glad I got your attention.
That's good. We're going to come back to that, John.
I got 6 blog posts going in my head.
I don't think we're done with that talk track. So it's easy to attack Amazon on SLAs, but in essence, the SLA is the degree of risk that you're willing to take and put on paper at scale. So how transparent will you be with your SLAs with the hybrid cloud, and will they exceed what Amazon and Google have been willing to, and HP for that matter, have been willing to promise at scale?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to be transparent. The SLAs will have real teeth associated with them, real business consequences for lack of execution against them. They will be highly transparent. We're going to have, true, we're going to measure these things and, provide uptime commitments, et cetera, against them. That's what an enterprise service is expected, right? At the end of the day, that's what enterprises demand, right? And when you pick up the phone and need support, you get it, right? And our, the VMware support is legendary. I mean, I'm just delighted by the support services that we offer, and the customer response to those is, hey, you fixed my problem, even when it wasn't your problem. right, and make it work. And that's what enterprise customers want, because that's what they have to turn around and commit back to their businesses against all of the other things as well, regulatory requirements, audit requirements, all of those types of things. That's what being an enterprise provider is all about.
All right, John wants to get back to talk about hybrid cloud.
I want to talk about OpenStack, because you guys are big behind OpenStack, and you talked about it as a market expansion. Internally, what are some of the development conversations and sales conversations with customers around OpenStack in terms of status, what's it doing, how you guys are looking at that and getting involved?
Yeah, and we've clearly said that you have to think about OpenStack, right, in the proper way. OpenStack is a framework for building clouds. And for people who are wanting to build their own cloud as opposed to get the prepackaged cloud, right? This is our strategy to enable those APIs, to give our components to those customers to help them go build it, right? And those customers largely are service providers, internet providers who have unique scale, integration, and other requirements. And we're finding it as a good market expansion opportunity for us. Put our components in those areas, contribute to the open source projects where we truly have IP and can differentiate for it, like at the hypervisor layer, like at the networking layer, and it's actually going pretty well. In our Q2 earnings call, you might recall, I talked about that our business with the public OpenStack customers was growing faster than the rest of our business. That's pretty significant, right? If you say, wow, if it's growing faster, that says, well, the strategy's working, right? And we are seeing a good response there, and clearly we want to communicate. We're going to continue that strategy going forward.
And the install base of virtualization is obviously impressive, and the question I want to ask you is, how do you see the evolution of the IT worker? I mean, you have in the old model DBAs, system admins, and now you have data science on the big data side. So with software-defined data center, the virtualization team seems to be the center point for that. What roles do you see changing with hybrid cloud and software-defined data center and end user computing?
Well, I think sort of the theme of our conference was Defy Convention, right? And why did we do that? Because we really see that the virtual admin, the virtual infrastructure, that they really have become the center of IT. Now, we need the competence of networking, the security guys, of the database guys, but that now has to happen in the context, right, of a virtualized environment. The DBA doesn't get to control his unique infrastructure. The Hadoop guy doesn't get his own unique infrastructure. They're all just workloads that run on this virtualized infrastructure that is increasingly adept and adaptable, right, to these different workload areas. And that's what we see going forward as we reach into these new areas. And the virtual admin, he has to go make best buddies with the networking guy and say, let me talk to you about virtual networking and how we're going to cross between the virtual overlay domain and the physical domain, and how these things are going to stitch together for making your job better, right, and delivering a better solution for our line of business and for our customers.
One thing you did to defy convention was to get on stage with Mark Andreessen. So we want to talk about that a little bit. You guys had, I would call it, slight disagreement. And just the vision of the future.
Yeah, just a little.
So, but I thought you were kind to him. He said, no startup that I work with, doesn't like any servers. And I thought you were going to, no, never mind, I won't even go there. I won't even go there, too many friends. So talk about that a little bit, that discussion that you had, your view of the world, and Mark's. How do you respond to that statement? Do they grow up into VMware customers? Is that sort of the obvious answer?
I have a lot of regard. Mark and I have known each other for probably close to 2 decades now, and we've partnered and sparred together for a long time. And he's a smart, successful guy, and I appreciate his opinions. But he takes a very narrow view, right, of a venture seed fund, right, who is optimizing cash flow, right, and why would they spend capital on cash flow when they can go get it as a service? That's exactly the right thing for a very early stage startup company to do in most cases, right? And Mark driving his companies to do that makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, right, if you want to reach into enterprise customers, you got to deliver enterprise services, right? You got to be able to scale these things. You got to be cost effective at these things, and then all the other aspects of governance, SLAs, et cetera, that we already talked about. So in that view, I think Mark's view is very perspective.
Well, also Zynga and those guys, when they grew up on Amazon, they went right to bare metal as soon as they started to scale.
Yeah, they had to bring it back in, right? Because they needed the SLAs, they needed the cost structures, they wanted to have the control of some of those applications.
And rental is more expensive than owning.
Right,
at the end of the day.
Somebody's going to pay the margins, right? On top of that to the providers. So, I appreciate the perspective, but to me it is very narrow and parochial to that point of view, and I think the industry is much broader, right? And things like policy and regulations are going to take decades, right? Not years, multiple decades for these things to change and roll out to enable, I'll say, a mostly public cloud world, ever. right? And that's why I say I think the hybrid is not a way station, right? It is the right balance point that gives customers flexibility to meet their business demands across a range of things. And Mark and I, obviously, we're quite in disagreement over that particular point.
And John, once again, Nick Carr, missed the mark, but he made a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
I think Mark Andreessen wants to put everyone in that book. Everyone could be the next Facebook where you build your own. I think that's not a reality in the enterprise. They kind of want to be like Facebook, like with applications, but do that. But I want to ask about automation. So we talked to a lot of customers here in theCUBE, and we all asked them the question, automation, orchestration at the top of the stack, they all want it, but they all say they all have different processes, and you really can't have a general purpose software approach. So Dave and I were commenting last night when we got back after the NetApp event was, you and Paul Moritz were talking in 2010 around this hardened top when you introduced that stack, and with infrastructure as a service, is there a hardened top where functionality is more important than which hardware you buy, and it's more important than which hardware you buy, so you can enable some of those service catalogs, some of those agility features in automation, because every customer will have a different process to be automated.
Yeah.
And how do you do that without human intervention? So where's that hardened top now? I mean, is it platform as a service, or is it still at the infrastructure as a service model?
Yeah, I think clearly the line between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service will blur, right? And it's really not clear, where you can quite draw that line. Also, as we make infrastructure more application aware, right, and have more application developer services associated with it, that line will blur even more. So I think it's going to be hard to call, here's that simple line associated with it. We'd also argue that, in this world that, customers, they have, heterogeneous tools that they need to work with. Some will have bought in, in big ways to some of the legacy tools, and as much as we're going to, try to help them move past some of those brittle environments, that takes a long time as well. I'd also say that, it's the age of APIs, not UIs. Right, and for us, it's very much to expose our value through programmatic interfaces so customers truly can, right, have the flexibility to integrate those and give them more choice, even as we're trying to build a more deeply integrated and automated stack that meets a general, right, set of needs for our customers.
So that makes a question, at the top of the stack where end user computing is going to sit and you're going to advance that piece, what's the to-do item for you? What needs to happen there? Is it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fully baked out, where are the white spaces that need to be tweaked either by partners or by VMware?
Yeah, and I think we're pretty quickly, I'll say, finishing the stack with regard to the traditional PC environments, and I think the amount of work to do for the mobile environment, right, is still quite enormous as we go forward. And in that, we're excited about Horizon getting some good uptake, a number of partner announcements this week, but there's a lot to be done in that space because people want to be able to secure apps, provision apps, deprovision apps, have secure workspaces, social experiences, a rich range of integration to the authentication devices associated with it, be able to have applications that are developed in that environment that access this hybrid infrastructure effectively over time, be able to self-compose those applications, put them into enterprise, right, stores and operations, be able to access this big data infrastructure. There's a whole lot of work to be done in that space, and I think that'll keep us busy for quite a number of years.
This is great. We're here, Pat Gelsinger, inside theCUBE. We could keep rolling until we get the hook, but a couple more final questions is, the analogy of cloud has always been like the grid, electricity. You kind of hinted to this earlier. I mean, is that a fair comparison? Electricity is kind of clean, it's stable, we have an actual national grid, it doesn't have bad data and hackers coming through it. So is that still a fair view of cloud? To kind of just talk about plugging electricity in the wall for IT.
I think that is so trite, right? And it came up in the the panel we had with Andreessen, Bechtelsheim, and Graham, and myself, because it is so standardized, 120 volts AC, right? Hey, maybe it gets distributed as 440 3-phase, but it is so standardized, it hasn't moved, right? Socket standards, right? You're done. Think how fast this cloud world is evolving, right? The line between IaaS and PaaS that we just touched upon, the services that are being offered on top of it.
Security.
Yeah, all of these different things. To me that is such a trite, simple analogy that it has become so used and abused in the process that I think it leads people to such wrong conclusions, right, about what we're doing and the innovation that's going on here and the potential that we're going to offer. So I hope that every one of our competitors takes that and says that's the right model, because I think it leads them to exactly the wrong conclusions.
I couldn't agree more. The big switch is a big myth. I wanted to get tactical for a minute. I listened to your conference calls. I can't wait to read the transcript. I got to listen to the calls. But just observing those and the conversations around here, I was going to ask you, I always ask CEOs, what keeps you up at night, and I always say execution. So let's focus on execution for the next 12 to 18 months. I came up with the following. So maintain dominance in vSphere, get revenue beyond vSphere, broaden end user license agreements, increase end user computing adoption, and proof points around hybrid cloud. Are those the big ones? Did I miss anything?
That's a good list.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's a good list.
Okay, so that's the thing, those are things that observers should watch over the next, say, 12 to 18 months as indicators of success and of what you're doing and what you're driving.
Yeah, and clearly inside of that with SDDC, obviously we think this environment for networking, right, and what we've really, I'll say, delivered that. That would be one in particular inside of that category that we would call out. With regard to our hybrid cloud strategy, it's clearly globalizing that platform, right? We announced Savvis here, right? But we need to make this available on a global basis. You go to an enterprise customer and they're going to say, I need services in Japan, I need services in Singapore, I need to be able to operate right on the global basis. So clearly, having that platform, building out the services on top of it, is another key aspect of building those hybrid use cases and more of the value on top of it. And then in the EUC space, we touched a bit on the mobile thing already.
So we'll have Martin on later, but his PowerPoint demonstration.
What a rock star, what a rock star.
He is a rock star, we've had him on before, he's fantastic. But his PowerPoint demonstration was very simple, made it seem so simple. It's not going to be that easy to virtualize the network. Can you talk about the headwinds there and the challenges that you have and the things that you have to do to actually make progress there and really move the needle?
Yeah, and it really sort of boils down in two aspects. One is, we are suggesting that there will be a software layer for networking that is far more scalable, agile, and robust than you could do in a physical networking layer. That's a pretty tall order, right? I need to be able to scale to tens, hundreds, millions of VMs, right? I need to be able to scale to terabits of cross-sectional packet flow through this. I need to be able to deliver services on top of this, right, that truly allow firewalls, load balancers, right, IDSs, all of those things to be agile, scale. Yeah, it is ambitious. This is, right, the most radical architectural statements in networking in the last 20 or 30 years, and that's what gets Martin passionate. So there's a lot of technical scale, and we really feel good about what we've done, right, but being able to prove that with robust scalability, right, for which, like the hypervisor, it is more reliable than hardware today, and be able to make that same statement about NSX, that just like ESX, it is better than hardware, right, in terms of its reliability, its resilience. That's an important thing for us to accomplish technically in that space. And then the other piece is showing customer value, right, getting those early customers. And what a powerful picture, GE, Citigroup, and eBay. Right, it's like, wow, right, these are massive customers, right, and being able to prove the value and the use cases in the customer settings, right, and if we do those two things, we think that, truly we will have accomplished something very, very special in the networking domain.
Absolutely.
Pat, talk about the innovation strategy. You've been now a year under your belt at VMware, and you also with EMC and Intel, and we mentioned on theCUBE many times, cadence of Moore's Law was kind of the culture of Intel. Why don't you talk about the innovation strategy of VMware going forward, your vision, but also talk about the culture, and talk about the one thing that VMware has from a culture that makes it unique, and what is that unique feature of the VMware culture?
Yeah, and we spent time as a team talking about what is it that drives our innovation, that drives our passion, and clearly as we've talked about our values as a team, it is very much about this passion for technology and passion for customers, and how those two coming together, right, with fundamental, disruptive, wow kind of technologies, where people just say, like they did with when they first use ESX, and they say, wow, I just didn't ever envision that you could possibly do that. And that's the experience that we want to deliver over and over again, right? So, hugely disruptive, powerful, software-driven virtualization technologies for these domains, but doing it in a way that customers just fall in love with our technologies. And as I got a note from Sanjay, and I just asked him, what do you think of VMworld? And he said, right, it is like a cult geek fest, right? Because, right, there's just this deep passion around what people do with our technology. Right, and they're not even at that point, they're not customers, they're not partners, they are deeply aligned, right, passionate zealots around what we are doing to make their lives so much more powerful, so much more enabled, right, and ultimately a lot more fun.
I mean, people, it's like being a car buff. You know, you got to know the engine, you want to know the speeds and feeds. It is a tech culture.
Yeah, it is
Pat,
absolutely
thanks
great.
for coming on theCUBE. We spent a lot of time with you here. I know we went a little bit over. Appreciate your time. Always great to see you.
Great
Looking
to see you
good.
as well. Thank you,
Tech
Nick.
athlete, Pat Gelsinger, touching all the bases here. We saw him last night at AT&T Park. Great event here, VMworld 2013. This is theCUBE. We'll be right back with our next guest after this short break, Pat Gelsinger, CEO on theCUBE.
Right.